In 2021, the American housing market reached heights never seen before. Prices surged, bidding wars erupted across the country. Families stretched their savings, taking on mortgages they could barely afford, believing real estate was the safest investment they could make. But they were wrong. What is unfolding right now across dozens of American cities is not just a slowdown. It's not even a correction. It's the early stages of a collapse. And by the end of this documentary, you'll see exactly which cities are falling first and why the warning signs were ignored for so long. To understand what is happening today, we must go back to 2020. When the Federal Reserve cut interest rates to near zero, the housing market ignited overnight. Suddenly, a home that cost $300,000 in early 2020 was selling for $500,000 by 2022. Investors flooded the market, builders couldn't keep up with demand, and ordinary Americans, afraid of being priced out forever, bought at any price. But in 2022, everything changed, and the Federal Reserve began raising interest rates aggressively, the fastest rate increase in 4 decades. Mortgage rates climbed from 3% to above 7% in less than 18 months. Monthly payments on a $400,000 home nearly doubled overnight. Buyers disappeared, but prices in many cities refused to fall. Until now. In 2025, the dam is finally breaking. These are the 10 cities that will feel it first. Number 10. Phoenix, Arizona. Few cities in America symbolize the housing boom and its collapse more clearly than Phoenix. Between 2020 and 2022, home prices in the Phoenix metro area surged by over 70%. Working-class neighborhoods that had never seen investor interest were suddenly flooded with cash buyers from California and New York. But the foundation of that boom was unstable. Phoenix's growth was driven not by local economic strength, but by speculative investment and remote work migration. As remote work declined and interest rates rose, that demand evaporated. Today, active listings in Phoenix have increased by over 40% compared to 1 year ago. Homes are sitting on the market for months without offers, and price reductions, once rare in this market, are now appearing on 1 in every 3 listings. And analysts project Phoenix home values could fall an additional 15 to 20% by the end of 2026. For thousands of homeowners who bought at peak prices, that means negative equity. Phoenix is number 10 on our list. What comes next, it is far more severe. Number 9. Austin, Texas. For a brief moment in American history, Austin was considered the future. Tech companies relocated their headquarters here. Tesla, Oracle, Apple. Young professionals arrived by the thousands, drawn by the promise of no state income tax and a booming job market. Between 2020 and 2022, home prices in Austin surged by nearly 80%, the fastest appreciation of any major American city during that period. But Austin built too fast and too much, and developers flooded the market with new construction, condos, townhomes, master-planned communities, all built on the assumption that demand would never slow. It slowed. Today, Austin has one of the highest new housing inventory levels in the nation. Supply has outpaced demand by a significant margin. Homes that sold in 48 hours in 2022 are now sitting on the market for 90 to 120 days. Price reductions have become standard, and median home values have already fallen over 18% from their 2022 peak. Analysts warn that with continued oversupply, Austin could see an additional 10 to 15% decline by end of 2026. The city that was supposed to be the next Silicon Valley is now a cautionary tale about speculative growth. Number 8, Tampa, Florida. Florida was ground zero for the pandemic housing migration. Millions of Americans, fleeing high-tax northeastern states, poured into Florida's Gulf Coast cities. Tampa's population grew faster than its infrastructure could handle. Schools overcrowded, roads congested, and home prices doubled. But Florida's housing market now faces a threat that no amount of demand can overcome: insurance. In the aftermath of repeated catastrophic hurricane seasons, major insurance providers have begun withdrawing from Florida entirely. Homeowners in Tampa are now paying 3 to 4 times the national average for property insurance, if they can get coverage at all. For many buyers running mortgage calculations, the insurance cost alone makes Tampa homes unaffordable. Combined with rising flood zone reclassifications and increasing property taxes, the total cost of home ownership in Tampa has become unsustainable for average families. Active listings are up over 50% year over year, and price cuts are appearing across every price segment. By 2026, Tampa's housing market is projected to correct by 15 to 20%. What the hurricanes didn't destroy, the economics might. Number 7, Las Vegas, Nevada. Las Vegas has always been a city built on risk, and in 2025, the housing market here is the riskiest bet in America. Las Vegas was one of the hardest hit cities during the 2008 financial crisis, when home values collapsed by over 60%. Many believe that history could not repeat itself, but the warning signs are eerily familiar. Investor activity in Las Vegas during the pandemic boom reached record levels, and at the peak, nearly 1 in 3 home purchases was made by an institutional investor or short-term rental operator. As the short-term rental market softens and interest rates remain elevated, those investors are now selling. Supply is flooding the market. Demand from local buyers, who depend on the hospitality industry for their incomes, remains constrained. Delinquency rates on mortgages in Nevada are rising faster than the national average. And in certain Las Vegas zip codes, prices have already declined by more than 20%. The city that survived 2008 may be heading toward a second chapter of that story. Number 6, Sacramento, California. Sacramento emerged as an unlikely boom market during the pandemic. Priced out of San Francisco and Los Angeles, thousands of California residents turned to Sacramento as an affordable alternative. Between 2020 and 2022, median home prices in Sacramento rose by over 55%. But Sacramento's growth was borrowed growth. It was not driven by new employers or economic development. It was driven entirely by displaced buyers from more expensive cities. As remote work policies reversed and California's overall population continued to decline, that flow of displaced buyers dried up. Sacramento now has a housing market with inflated prices, and no new pool of buyers to sustain them. Inventory levels have surged. Median prices have fallen over 14% from peak, and mortgage delinquencies are trending upward across the region. By 2026, Sacramento is projected to give back the majority of its pandemic-era price gains. For buyers who purchased at peak, that means years of negative equity ahead of them. Number 5, Boise, Idaho. In 2021, Boise became one of the most talked about housing markets in America. A small city of 240,000 people suddenly found itself on every relocation list in the country. Californians, Oregonians, Washingtonians, all arriving simultaneously and chasing affordability and open space. The result was extraordinary. Boise home prices increased by nearly 60% in just 18 months, making it one of the fastest appreciating markets in American history. But Boise's economy was never sized for those valuations. Local incomes tied to agriculture, healthcare, and regional services could not support $500,000 median home prices. As out-of-state migration slowed, the market lost its engine entirely. Today, Boise is experiencing one of the sharpest corrections in the Mountain West. Home prices have already declined over 20% from their peak, among the largest corrections of any American city since 2022. And the correction is not finished. Number 4, Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis represents a different kind of housing crisis. Unlike the boom and bust markets of the Sun Belt, Memphis was never a city of speculative excess. It was instead a market targeted by institutional investors seeking low-cost rental properties. Between 2018 and 2023, large investment firms purchased tens of thousands of single-family homes in Memphis neighborhoods. Rents were raised, maintenance was deferred, and local residents found themselves priced out of neighborhoods they had lived in for generations. Now, as those investment firms begin offloading properties in response to rising costs and declining rental demand, Memphis faces a different collapse. Not a crash of overvalued luxury homes, but a flood of investor-owned properties hitting the market simultaneously, with no local buyer base capable of absorbing them. The result will be the same for homeowners. Falling values, declining neighborhoods, and a housing market that may take a decade to recover. Number 3, Jacksonville, Florida. Jacksonville was the quiet success story of the Florida boom. Larger than Miami in geographic size, but far more affordable, Jacksonville attracted a wave of buyers who wanted Florida living without Miami prices. Median home values rose by over 65% between 2020 and 2023. But Jacksonville now faces the same insurance crisis, threatening all of coastal Florida, compounded by its own unique vulnerabilities. As one of the largest cities by area in the continental United States, Jacksonville has significant exposure to flood risk across its vast geography. FEMA flood map remapping has reclassified thousands of properties into higher risk zones, dramatically increasing insurance costs and reducing buyer eligibility for conventional mortgages. New listings in Jacksonville are rising sharply. Pending sales are falling, and price reductions are becoming the norm rather than the exception. Jacksonville entered this cycle late. It may exit it last. Number 2, Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta has long been held up as a model of Southern economic growth, a city of opportunity, a destination for Black wealth creation, a tech and film industry hub, and for years, that story was true. But Atlanta's housing market has developed structural cracks that are becoming impossible to ignore. The Atlanta metro area has absorbed massive speculative construction over the past 4 years. Builders, in anticipating continued population growth, delivered tens of thousands of new units into a market that is now softening. At the same time, Atlanta's affordability advantage over northern cities is rapidly disappearing. The median home price in Atlanta has risen to levels that exceed the income support of the local workforce. Debt-to-income ratios among recent Atlanta buyers are among the most stretched in the Southeast. And in the suburban counties surrounding Atlanta, price declines are already visible. Days on market are rising. Concessions from sellers have returned to the market for the first time since 2019. Atlanta is not falling off a cliff, but it is sliding, steadily, toward a correction that could reshape the city's economic geography for years to come. It is number 2 on our list, and number 1, it is in a category of its own. And at number 1, a city that was once considered the crown jewel of American real estate. San Francisco, California. At its peak in 2022, the median home price in San Francisco exceeded $1.3 million. It was the most expensive major housing market in the United States. Today, that same median price has fallen below $900,000, a decline of more than 30% in less than 3 years. But the price collapse is only part of the story, and San Francisco has lost over 7% of its total population since 2020, one of the steepest urban population declines in modern American history. Major corporations, one including Twitter, Oracle, and Charles Schwab, have relocated their headquarters out of the city entirely. Downtown office vacancy rates now stand above 30%, the highest of any major American city. And as businesses leave, tax revenues fall. As tax revenues fall, city services deteriorate. And as services deteriorate, more residents leave. It is a cycle that urban economists call a doom loop, and San Francisco is caught directly in the center of it. Projections for 2026 suggest that San Francisco home prices could fall an additional 15 to 25% from today's levels, bringing the total peak-to-trough decline to over 50% in some neighborhoods. For a city that defined American ambition and innovation, the collapse of its housing market is not just a financial story. It is the story of a changing America. The cities on this list did not arrive at this moment overnight. The warning signs existed for years, like in the data, in the demographics, in the economics. But during a period of easy money and speculative euphoria, those warnings went unheard. As we move into 2026, the question is no longer whether these markets will fall. The question is how far and who will bear the cost. For homeowners, investors, and families watching their equity erode, the answer to that question will define the next decade of American life. This is the changing America. We will continue to follow this story as it develops.